Right now on Upfront.
2024 in the spotlight.
If you would have sent those votes back to Georgia, Pennsylvania, and other states, Wisconsin, which if you look at Wisconsin.
Former President Donald Trump leading the Republican field. A debate in Milwaukee just 3 months away. But will Trump show as more potential Republican candidates test the water?
We don't have any palace intrigue. We don't have any drama.
In a key battleground divided.
I don't know what Donald Trump has to be afraid of.
Our guest this Sunday, former Wisconsin Congressman Reed Ribble, ABC News Deputy Political Director Avery Harper. Then a critical shared revenue vote likely just days away.
Curious where negotiations are, if there's been any movement this week, and if we're any closer to a bill that you could sign.
Well, I'm sure hoping.
Police funding statewide on the line as another officer killed in the line of duty is laid to rest. Jim Palmer, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Professional Police Association, is here.
And Nelson Mandela's grandson, a stop in Wisconsin, now just hours away. Mandela Mandela joining us from South Africa, the reason for his U.S. tour, the launch in Wisconsin, and some controversy surrounding it all.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and Political Director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Happy Mother's Day. The calendar says 2023, but at times it already sure feels like 2024.
Former President Donald Trump in a contentious televised town hall ahead of a primary calendar and schedule now being solidified with all roads leading to Wisconsin. The first Republican presidential primary debate now just 3 months away in Milwaukee this August, all ahead of the Republican National Convention next summer.
Reed Ribble is a former Republican congressman from the Green Bay area. He joins us now. Former Congressman, good to see you like always.
Hey, it's great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Let's look back at that town hall. Trump again repeated those lies of illegal votes in Wisconsin, a rigged election, Milwaukee ballot dumps, all claims rejected by judges, some that he appointed in the last several years. What do you make of that conversation still happening? And I guess more importantly, what impact do you think that still has here in Wisconsin as we look now to 2024?
You know, I think it rallies his base. They love to hear that. You know, it's more about sticking it to the libs than it is about any policy going forward. And so he's really pandering to the base in an effort to box out opponents like Governor Ron DeSantis, who's also a bit of a populist and could, who's younger, more energetic, has got quite a record down in Florida. I think he's concerned about DeSantis, so he's trying to solidify his base.
We know that Mr. Trump won Wisconsin in 2016. He lost the state in 2020. When you look at that town hall and some of his answers, or what some would say non-answers related to things like immigration, abortion, Ukraine, how do you think that all of that is going to play out with Wisconsin Republicans?
Well, I think it plays out just fine with the harder right part of the base. I think that there is an element of Republicans in Wisconsin that are starting to get concerned about this constant looking backwards. And they want to know how he's going to deal with inflation, which he didn't speak to. There really weren't a lot of questions about tomorrow. The bulk of the questions were about yesterday in that town hall. And so I don't know that that really helps him going forward with soft Republicans that will vote in a primary. It will hurt him with independents for sure. And so, but we're talking primary politics. I think he's got a strategy. It looks like he's going to stick with it.
Reed, there are obviously other candidates watching how the president performed in that town hall. Ron DeSantis, you just mentioned one of them. He was in Marathon County in central Wisconsin last weekend, received a warm welcome, some 500 plus Republicans there. I want to take a listen to one thing he said to that crowd last weekend.
I come bearing good news. And you may say, what good news is there? Republicans have had a series of disappointing election results, not just here in Wisconsin, but really across the country. The good news is the state of Florida and what we've achieved shows Republicans can win again. We don't have any leaks in my administration. We don't have any palace intrigue. We don't have any drama.
All right, no specific mention of Trump, but you hear what he's doing here. You have those like Paul Ryan rejecting Trump, Assembly Speaker Robin Vos saying he doesn't want Trump as the nominee, saying he's going to lose. What are Wisconsin Republicans thinking right now?
Well, I think he's right. I mean, the fact of the matter, there was a very large crowd up there in Wausau to see Governor DeSantis. And you start drawing 500 people to a Lincoln Day dinner, that's a big deal. And what he was saying, without calling Trump out by name, is, listen, you can have all the things you love about Donald Trump. I'm a fighter, and I'm gonna challenge the left on all these issues without all the drama and chaos that Trump brings. And he did it without calling Trump out by name. That won't last. When you get in a debate with Donald Trump, you're going to have to take him on straight face to face.
Who do you want to run in 2024?
Me personally, I'd love to see Tim Scott get in the race. You've got a guy of high character. He's got a good record in the U.S. Senate. African American, so he appeals to a more diverse Republican audience, and he's a true conservative, not a populist.
Do you plan on endorsing in the primary?
I probably will, but I want to wait and see what the field is. I think we're a bit early yet. You give this a couple more months, we're going to know. Certainly by the convention, you're going to know. And then at that point, I'll say who my favorite is. But right now, if Tim Scott gets in, he's going to get my endorsement.
A lot to come. Former Wisconsin Congressman Reed Ribble, always great to have your insight and analysis. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
Let's bring in ABC News Deputy Political Director Avery Harper. Hey, Avery, good to see you. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's look ahead to the first Republican presidential primary debate here in Milwaukee in August. The big question, will Trump be on stage?
Well, I think that is a big question for a reason. The bottom line is the former president is quite erratic. And so even if the RNC had any assurances from the Trump team that he's going to participate, August is a long ways away. We do have reporting that former President Trump has indicated that he could skip the first or the second debate, or even both of them. The bottom line is that the former president loves to be in the spotlight. And so the will he or won't he participate keeps him front and center of in the conversation. And if there's anything that we know from his political rise, that's what he loves.
And you mentioned the polling. The latest ABC polling shows Mr. Trump solidifying a pretty early lead. Among those polled, 51% preferring Mr. Trump compared to 25% preferring Ron DeSantis, the nearest opponent. What do you anticipate will change between now and that first presidential primary debate in Milwaukee this August?
Right. Well, we will have more candidates announce formally their campaigns. But the fact remains, former President Trump really does wield significant influence within the Republican Party. There are lots of supporters of his who are going to be energized and want to head out to some of these primaries in order to support him. And so anyone else who is in the GOP field is really trying to eat into this enormous lead that we see the former president having.
Wisconsin Democrats here in the state almost immediately started fundraising after the town hall on Thursday. We have a critical U.S. Senate race here as well coming up in 2024. Broadly speaking, Avery, how much of a battleground is Battleground Wisconsin going to be next year?
I think it's going to be critical for any candidate hoping to get the nomination. Wisconsin is a state that is pretty evenly divided when you look at the partisan lay of the land there. And the town hall was really a reminder of who former President Trump is. And for some Republicans, the part of the party that supports former President Trump, like the folks who were in the room at that town hall in New Hampshire, that's a good thing. That is a reminder and a way to bolster support for the former president. I think for more moderate voters, for Democrats, it's a reminder of what's at risk if the former president gets a nomination.
A lot ahead in this week ahead. ABC News Deputy Political Director Avery Harper. Avery, thanks for your time like always.
Thank you.
Up next, the shared revenue bill in the Assembly this week. Police funding, a key part of what city officials say they need. The head of the State Police Association is here next.